From the initial view, the architecture impresses upon visitors the importance of what lies within. Seeming to rise organically from the earth, the building itself is a symbol of our nation's veterans and their resilient spirit and unending commitment to making this country stronger. Once inside the museum, visitors embark on a narrative journey, following exhibitions that focus on the servicemen and women and their families. Individual stories and shared experiences are illustrated through personal artifacts, quotes, letters, photographs, and powerful films of veterans telling their unique story in their own words. The National Veterans Memorial and Museum. It's more than a museum. It's the new home of the brave. Plan your visit today.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. My name is Colonel Bill Butler, U.S. Army retired Chief of Staff, and on behalf of Lieutenant General Mike Farrader, our President and CEO, we'd like to welcome you to our latest installment of Virtual Rally Point. Today we've got a great show. We've got Command Sgt Major retired Mike Hall joining us, and he's going to talk about our NCO Corps, the non-commissioned officers in our military, our sergeants. We are the envy of the world because we've got such a competent, capable, professional corps of non-commissioned officers and sergeants who help lead, train, mentor, and develop our soldiers, our Marines, our airmen, our Coast Guard men, and our sailors. And they also help develop junior officers over the course of their journey to become our senior leaders. So a little bit about Command Sergeant Major Hall. He's a native Ohioan. He joined the military right out of high school and served in progressively more challenging assignments for the next 32 years. 20 of which were in the Army's 75th Ranger Regiment, one of the premier units in our Army. He retired and successfully transitioned into a civilian career. And then remarkably, after only 1 year as a retiree, he was called back to active duty. I'm not sure if that was the needs of the Army or the needs of Brenda, because he was getting under her skin. But regardless, it's a great accomplishment because he was asked to join the International Security Assistance Force, NATO, and U.S. Forces Afghanistan as the Command Sergeant Major. So he retired again a second time and transitioned into several corporate positions, and now is leading as the Executive Director of the Three Rangers Foundation that helps mentor transitioning Rangers into the ranks of retirees. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to our President and CEO, Lieutenant General Farrader, for a brief introduction. Thank you.
Well, Sergeant Major, great to see you and everybody. We literally are in the lobby of a hotel doing this on the fly, as so many times we have in our life. Sergeant Major, welcome. It's great to have you here.
It's great to see you again, sir.
Thanks. Hey, listen, everybody, I can tell you there is no leader more respected or revered than Command Sergeant Major Mike Hall. His steady hand took the Rangers from the 80s and 90s and into combat. His wise counsel led young officers, senior officers, and general officers to the right decisions for taking care of the soldier or the service member and taking care of the mission. And so I have so many Sergeant Major Mike Hall isms that I use every week and that I rely on for sure. So, and he's super humble, so he's going to chew me out for even saying that much. So, Sergeant Major, how about just, so our audience is coast to coast and north to south. it grows. Probably somewhere between 5,000 and above will eventually view this today. And that's why we're so happy to have you. But just start by, there you were, it's 1976-ish or so, and you decided to join the Army. Give us a little background on who you are, how you grew up, and what led you to serve in the United States Army.
Yeah, I grew up in Northeast Ohio, and grew up in an environment, one of the broken homes environments that you read about every once in a while. My dad left when I was 2 or 3 years old. Never really knew him. Went through a couple different stepdaddies that weren't exactly good examples either. And spent most of my life growing up on welfare. But as you hear people saying, I'm living proof. I mean, you don't really know it. I mean, you don't know what you don't have if you've never seen it before. But back then, I thought I wanted to go to college. I thought I was going to be a professional baseball player. There was only one problem: I wasn't very good. So, I had a couple half scholarship offers, to maybe play, but financially, that just wasn't going to work for my family situation. But more than anything else, in those days, it was in Northeast Ohio was still, older, conservative. I mean, that's what you did. You graduated high school. You went in the service for a couple of years. You came back. You worked for Ford Motor Company. You went to college. So college, I mean, mid 70s back then wasn't that big of a deal because unions were so good. And so you worked for Ford Motor Company, General Motors, U.S. Steel, or something like that. So my uncles had been good examples. They all served, and it was just something that you did. And I'd always wanted to be a Marine infantryman, so I signed up to be a Marine. Right next door was the Army recruiting station on Broadway there in Lorain. And he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I'm going to be a Marine." He goes, "We got something better than Marines. We got these airborne Rangers." And I said, "What's an airborne Ranger?" So he took me inside and showed me a bunch of videos that had nothing to do with the Rangers because the Ranger battalions were brand new back then. And so I said, "Yeah, that's for me." And I signed up, which, and I was live bait for them back then because nobody was joining the military. Nobody was certainly joining the Army, and nobody was certainly joining the Army to be an infantryman. So I was pretty easy pickings for them. But that's how it all started. And I went in, and everything that the recruiter told me did not come true. But in the end, it all worked out. I ended up going straight to the Rangers in a little roundabout route. So eventually it did work out, even though not the way he told me. But it was my fault. I didn't read the contract. I just listened to what he said. And I ended up in the 1st Ranger Battalion, and it really changed my life.
I'm sure it did. We say that the non-commissioned officer is the backbone of the Army and the backbone of our military service. And you spent, so much time in the regiment. You're in the Ranger Hall of Fame as well. You're still a counsel, as we were just talking about, to the officers who serve there and the senior NCOs who serve there. But how is it that you've observed how the Ranger NCO is brought up, raised, and then makes an impact in organizations?
Well, we were, I came in at a good time. I mean, the history of the history of NCOs in the Army was usually admin duty, the infamous good order and discipline, but they were never responsible for training. I mean, even through all the war years, they were never really responsible for training. But I came in an era that, the all volunteer force had started. The Army had changed its regulations, saying that, given responsibility for training to non-commissioned officers, which until it was either the mid 60s or the early 1970s had never been written anywhere. That was always the junior officer's responsibility to train the men. And in most cases, there's no distinction between officers and the men. There is no non-commissioned officer class of soldier. So, I'd walked into 1st Ranger Battalion, and all my non-commissioned officers were Vietnam infantry vets. I mean, what we called, the last of the professional non-commissioned officers had migrated to the Ranger Battalions when General Abrams stood up the organization. And it was, I mean, they weren't as much good order and discipline kind of guys. They were combat veterans, and that's what they knew. They knew how to train soldiers to survive in combat. and that was a focus that I was brought up on, and the focus that I carried for my whole career was, the job of the NCOs is to prepare people for combat through training. And that's something that, it started there because it was an organization where that wasn't afraid to enforce standards. It wasn't afraid to give people responsibility. And, as per General Abrams' vision, eventually that theory, those leaders, both officer and non-commissioned officer, went out to the rest of the Army and said, no, this is what our Army can become if we empower our non-commissioned officers.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about your view of the responsibility of training the soldier. And I remember we were standing somewhere, and you said to me and to a group, "Hey, if I was a team leader and someone messed with my ranger, it's a fist fight." And so, that stuck with me to this idea of it more than just a 9 to 5, make sure that he can shoot. Those were your guys. So talk to me about that idea of leadership.
Yeah, one thing that I learned again, looking at the leaders that brought me up was, and I could tell some stories about the mid-'70s Ranger battalions, and I used to tell those stories, and people say, "Oh, he's got too many bumps on the head." It never really happened, but it was a very, very physical unit, in a way more physical than it is today. Although the soldiers and Rangers today are much better physical shape than we were ever in. Quite frankly, it's a different kind of shape and focus. But what I learned early on is that people don't do the real hard things in life because you tell them, because they're afraid of you. They do the real hard things in life because they respect you and they respect what you've got to say. And that's what I learned. I mean, it was the simple lesson I learned is when I walked into the 1st Ranger Battalion, my squad leader had the whole squad gathered around. There was they were 6-man rooms. They were designed by the Army to be 2-man rooms, but they were 6-man rooms. And he sat me down and he said, we're spit, shine, and starch unit. It's, as you recall, that period of the Army. And he says, "Do you know how to spit, shine your boots?" And I said, "No, not really." So he sat down and he spit, shine one, and he gave my other boot to my other boots to the rest of the squad, and they spit, shine the rest of my boots. And he goes, "You got it?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I got it." And he said, "Do you know how to iron?" He says, "We starch our uniforms." And I said, "No." So he sat down there and he ironed one uniform, and the other 6 of the old camouflage OG 107s, was given to the rest of the squad, and I ironed up the rest of my uniforms. And do you know how to sew? We're an airborne unit. We don't use pin on ranks. You're gonna have to sew your rank on and everything. I said, "No." And so he and the squad sewed up the rest of my uniforms, and that was sort of my, and at the end of the day, he came in and he threw a stamped envelope on my bunk that had my mom's address, which I'm not sure how he got, quite frankly, because the Army wasn't good at, with information back then. And he said, "And I want you to write your mom, and I want you to tell her, give her the number to the CQ desk," because nobody had phones. The only person in the platoon that was married was the platoon leader, Lieutenant Logan. And I said, "Call the CQ desk and ask for me, and I'll talk to her. And I don't care what you tell her, just tell her if she's got any problems, call me." And, the way I grew up, and, not having a role model of people that really cared about you. I mean, of course, my mom cared about me, and my uncles cared about me, but they had their own families, their own things to take care of. But, I mean, it was that day I decided, then we had physical training the next day, and it was, we had never run that fast or that far in AIT, I'll tell you that. Yeah. But, and I was a decent athlete in high school, but I mean, there's a gap there, but there's no way I was going to fall out, because there was no way I was going to, let my sergeant down, let my peers down, because I mean, these guys, they really cared. I mean, it seems simple, and some people are listening and say it sounds pretty goofy, but wow, it had an effect on me of, people really, really cared. It's always the little stuff, and it's not what you say, it's what you do. And I think that's the lesson I learned from Sergeant Brooks and the rest of the guys in the squad. It's what they did. And, it wasn't just a one-time thing. That's how we treated each other. And like I said, I was just never going to let them down. And physical things, yeah, there's a certain amount of physical shape you got to be in, but as you know, it's mostly mental.
Right.
It's mostly motivation, and Olympic athletes there are tons and tons of people that are in just as good a shape as the Olympic 5,000 meter champion, but the 5,000 meter champion has a mental strength, something that drives him, even though that there are many people that have the same physical attributes that he or she does.
I appreciate that. And we've always called the 1st Ranger Battalion and all the Ranger battalions a leadership factory. And what you described gives the insights from the young man that shows up, the young Ranger who shows up. And then from there, though, I mean, that the regiment today has senior enlisted advisors or command sergeant majors. They're everywhere. They are not just the backbone of the Army, but they are the leadership of the Army as well. How did that pay it back, pay it forward? How did that come about? And what was the we used to use the Ranger officers and see how many degrees of separation to General Downing or degrees of separation to General McChrystal and the like. How did you see that development of a culture of, there was purpose in developing the non-commissioned officers of the Ranger Regiment. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't know who said it, but I use it a lot. I mean, the greatest weakness of the Ranger Regiment is Ranger privates, because they're new and they're trainable. But the greatest strength of the Ranger Regiment is Ranger privates, because they grow up to be Ranger non-commissioned officers. And it's a great environment. It's a culture that nobody really wants to leave, but eventually, a lot of people do have to leave because it's a pyramid. I mean, well, back then, there was 8 enlisted men and an 11-man squad, but then there's 5 men in a fire team, and there's only 1 sergeant. So somebody's got to make sergeant, and the other 3 got to go somewhere else. And then you got a couple sergeants, and there's only 1 staff sergeant. So one of them's got to go somewhere else. And now you got 4 staff sergeants, and you only got 1 sergeant first class. So 3 guys got to go somewhere else. And they're quality people. They take the standards that they've learned, and they realize that it's very possible to take those standards wherever they go. And that's what happened. I mean, that was always Abrams' charter, was never to make the Rangers an elite strike force. Same thing happened in World War II. I mean, the Ranger battalions were formed to get combat experience and then go out to the combat divisions and share that experience. They turned into an assault force, and the same thing happened. But folks carried the same standards. I mean, you can't. It's talk about degrees of separation. You can't find a unit out there that doesn't have a blue book. Very few people can tell you where that blue book come from. They'll all go back to General von Steuben. Well, that's what we go back to too. But I mean, all those blue books were carried by Rangers. The different standards of training and that you see out there. I mean, so much of it you can bring back to what the Ranger battalions learned and brought to the rest of the Army. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it had to do with resources, but the biggest resource we had was time. I mean, as you know, that's all we did is train. We didn't have the distractors. I mean, soldiers don't join the Army to cut grass and paint rocks, and we didn't have to cut grass and paint rocks. We trained, and so they were able to take that to the rest of the Army and just take their standards and it was what General Lazinski used to call teach people what right looks like. Not that they were bad organizations or bad leaders, but in many cases they just hadn't had the opportunity to see what right looked like, and getting someone in there that could show them what right looked like, and more than anything else, empower them. They were able to succeed. I know when I became the CSM at 3187, 101st, maybe we taught them some things, but more than anything else, I mean, we empowered the junior officers and we empowered the non-commissioned officers to do what they came in the Army to do, to train their soldiers for combat. And it was amazing. And I thought I was going to, I did a little bit of teaching here and there, but more than anything else, it was just convincing the commander to empower them to do what they knew how to do. And they did it. I mean, and it was, the exact same formula in the Rangers. And I think that's what it was more than anything else. And having commanders that truly cared enough. I mean, taking care of soldiers is having their back. It's writing off their mistakes. As long as it's moral and ethical, and it's just a mistake because you have to look in the mirror most of the time and they make a mistake because it's your fault because you didn't train them well enough. You didn't give them the resources that they needed to be successful.
Exactly right.
Yeah, that's what General Lohr started and carried on. Carries on to this day.
That's amazing. I'll make so hey everyone. We are the National Veterans Memorial Museum, and we're with Command Sergeant Major Mike Hall today. Distinguished Army Ranger Hall of Fame, but most importantly, just an amazing leader. Here at the National Veterans Memorial Museum, we're in Columbus, Ohio, and we don't get any federal funds, so you'll see some notes while we're doing this to join as a member or to bring your organization for an amazing time. That allows programs such as this to occur. Hey, Sergeant Major, as you talk about this whole idea of Rangers go forth and share the best leadership and training techniques and understanding of combat. Would you agree that also all of our military members, when they transition out of service, they're actually that same kind of apostle, disciple, or whatever, where veterans go, things start to get better because they've proven they can get out of mom's basement, they can get through basic training or boot camp, they can deploy, they can learn, they pick up skills. But talk a little bit about how that translates to the broader audience today of how important it is for veterans to be in organizations and be hired by good organizations.
I think, you can go back a little bit of history. The boom of our economy, the boom of our nation was in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. And who was responsible for that boom? It was veterans coming back from the war. But, and that's what built our country. That's what built us into such a strong nation. But I mean, what kind of experience did these guys have on computers or automobiles? Or they didn't. They were in they went into an organization and they discovered that, if we all work together, if we have a common goal, if we work towards something bigger than us, we can all be successful and we can make things better. And if we trust people if we really power things down and we trust people, they'll actually innovate and they'll make our organization better. All we got to do is give them the time and resources to do it. And, that still holds true today is, it's the world has become more technical. That's really a relative term. And but you still, if you get a veteran out there and if you give them the opportunity, they may not have the technical skill. They may not have the degree at such and such college, but they're going to make the organization better because they understand how to motivate people. And every organization, studies and studies and studies will tell you, or successful organizations are organizations that have good cultures, that trust their people, that trust their leadership, that are empowered. And that's what the military teaches you is to be able to do that. And it wasn't all the generals and the colonels out of World War II. It was the sergeants who had been thrust into leadership positions and there's no such thing as a professional non-commissioned officer corps. They were choosing among their peers to lead their squads, to lead their platoons, and sometimes to lead companies as they got commissioned. And it's just that American spirit, they had never seen that kind of opportunity before. So when they got out of the service, they were given that opportunity in the commercial world, and they acted the same way. And I think that's always been true. And one of my favorite quotes, and I'm looking at you as a man and officer I greatly respect, but General Patton said the greatest army in the world would have American non-commissioned officers and German officers, and that was just it wasn't a ding on American officers. It was a compliment, to what Americans are all about.
Yeah, that's great. Imagine being a guy who gets hired to be the president of the National Veterans Memorial Museum, and then they told me, you're the only one we've hired. Imagine that. And so all of my guys who are watching this right now, everything you said, they've experienced it. Basically, I told, invent it. We need stationery to write a thank you note. Invent it. We got a new copy. We're going to buy a copy machine. We're going to buy, for postage. And so everything, including this program, was invented with the big I word: innovate, create. And so I think, and empower. And so these words that you've used are what you taught me, what I learned serving in many units, but especially in the regiment. Talk a little bit more, because I think it translates to business as well, about a lot, enforcing the standards. I think you've told me all units have standards and great units enforce them. And but talk about how, while having standards, that those are not handcuffs or shackles. You allow evolution, you allow creativity, and then you reestablish a better way in a new standard. But talk about it, because you saw quite a bit of evolution of the regiment during your time in uniform.
Yeah, well, I think I lost my train of thought nowadays, or a second ago, which happens a lot. But I don't have a memory problem because VA says I didn't have a problem. No, but yeah. So I'm sorry. Could you say the question one more time?
Yeah. As well as being known for adhering to standards, we're also in the Ranger Regiment known for evolving and inventing and creating.
Yeah. The best ideas come from the bottom, but what the top has to do is have a good communication plan to say, this is the end product. I can't tell you how to do it, but I can tell you what I want and why I need it. And here's the resources. Now go tell me how to make that happen. And that's what works in the military. That's what worked in the Rangers. Is our commanders were very, very good at saying, I'm not sure exactly how to do this, but I know this is what we want. I know this is what we want to be. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I can't tell you, for instance, a battalion commander telling a squad leader, 3 levels down, I can't tell you how that really equates to what you got to do, but here's what I'm looking for. Here's why I need it. Now you tell me how we're going to get this done, because I can't do your job. I've never done your job. And, and that's one thing, you keep talking about non-commissioned officers, but, one of the great strengths about the regiment was having officers that were willing to do that. And that takes a lot, because at the end of the day, as a commander is responsible for everything the unit does or doesn't do. So nothing can go down and do something screwy, which you really have nothing to do, but you're still responsible for it. So for, in order to able to empower people, that takes a lot of guts, a lot of moral courage to allow people to do that. And, in the business world, it's the same thing. Sometimes people think, they have these great ideas, and they are great ideas. They wouldn't be CEOs if they weren't great ideas. But what most organizations and a lot of times the Army hasn't been good at is saying, here's what I want. It's great. But they never take the time to figure out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 levels down. How does that apply to them?
Right.
And that takes a lot of work. And that's the most important thing that leaders need to understand is you need to take the time to figure out how this applies to you. And this is a little technical for some of the audience, but remember when Airland Battle came out in the mid 80s or whatever, and it was all about, it was about echelons above corps. It was about moving, large organizations and maneuvering and getting behind and attacking the flanks. But they never told squads and platoons how that affected them. Of course, the bottom line is, as you and I know, it had nothing to do with squads and platoons. They were still doing the same things they've always done. It's conduct fire and movement, with fire support. That's all they did. But, people tried to interpret that document and say, oh, it's changing how squads and platoons and companies fight. And it didn't. And it screwed us up for a while, because we're trying to take the principles of Airland Battle, which is about echelons above corps, and try to, apply it to the point of the spear where people actually had to do the fighting. And, I've seen that in several commercial companies too, where you have these great ideas, and then the boss, the CEO walks around and says, why are you doing that? Well, you told me to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
didn't, but no one could take the time to communicate down what was really the why and what they were really looking for and how it might apply to them, and then empower them to do that. And of course, that's why organizations don't move forward. They don't grow because if you don't empower the lowest levels and willing to have their back, you're never going to grow. You're going to fail.
Yeah, great points. You and I talked one day about U.S. Army combatives, and we were fielding combatives and trying to figure out what's the best hand-to-hand fighting. General McChrystal and Kurt Fuller and others started it and kind of ended up in my lap. But I was trying to figure out how much should each soldier learn, and you said, hey, Colonel Fair, go simple. Look, this guy's got to learn how to iron his pants. He's got to learn how to do his boots. He's got to learn how to shoot a rifle. So you give him more than 10 of these original tasks, it's not necessary, it's not helpful, and you're actually going to move that individual backwards. So again, great advice at the time, and also great insights to see it through the eyes of the person you're going to ask to do it. And when you say, why can't you keep up? And it's like, you've given me 30 hours of stuff to do every single day, so to speak. But I always remember that as well, Sergeant Major, and that ability to get to the important rather than the urgent is something I think you were always and still are very good at. But any thoughts on keep it simple, stupid kind of idea?
Yeah, because the lower you go down the chain, the more things you're given to do, and it's not the more things that you're given to do as much as your priorities change all the time. And so you're trying to make your organization better, and you concentrate on this, and then someone comes along and says, do this. And then someone else comes along and says, do this. And someone else comes along and do this. And what can happen is, why should I do anything? Because it's going to change in 6 months anyways when a new guy comes in.
Right.
And so, and I think for organization, the Army's always talked about, and a lot of businesses talk about, let's do the basics really well. Do you want to do 3 things really good, or do you want to do 10 things mediocre? Well, if you do 3 things really good, you're going to grow. Your most precious asset is time. And, we had, the way that concept came around is, we sort of looked at, okay, what does our higher headquarters need us to do? And a lot of times you have to help them with that decision. Like I said, the top's got to come up with the idea, and the bottom's got to tell them how to do it. So you got to help them decide what it is. And then we decide, okay, what do we have to do to be able to do this? And then we looked at the collective and individual tasks, and we said, okay, now how much time do we got to do these? Well, we've got this amount of time and to be able to do this. Okay, so let's figure out the very basic things we have to do that go across all these things that we need to be successful. And let's figure out what those tasks are and how much time it's going to take, and really take an appetite suppressant, because, we had to figure out what is the minimum acceptable standard that can be maintained and sustained, because people come and go, assets are always limited. So what is a minimum acceptable standard to do this? And, combatives was an example of, we decided this is a minimum acceptable standard, and, meet this standard. And if you go beyond that standard, the old Army theory is, he's really good at combatives because that's what's important today, but okay, let's look at the rest of your physical training. Let's see how you're doing on your medical skills. Let's see how you're doing on your small unit drills. Let's look at the other principles. Oh, they're below standard. You haven't met the standard on these. So, what we try to do is give people attainable standards. And I almost hate the word goals, but it's a matter of your interpretation. But, tell people exactly what they've got to accomplish. And, and then they'll figure out how to make it better. I mean, the original Big Four that you were there for, I mean, it's grown. If we look at it, the way I look at it now, it's almost not the basics because it's so advanced. But they got there because it started with, the minimum acceptable basic standards that they could do. And, slowly and surely it turned into an organization that is, the most innovative and capable probably in the military. So the same theory is there. The original Big Four, has changed drastically, but they've been able to really grow the organization because of that concept of let's figure out what the minimum acceptable sustainable standards are based on leadership changes, people changes, technology changes. How do we keep up? And that's how the Ranger regiments. It's in a way it's not innovative because no organization is really innovative. The Ranger Regiment has been really successful because it's a great fast follower. Nobody can look in the future. 20-year plans. Remember the Soviet 5-year plans? They changed every year. Because you really can't look in the future. So what you got to do is look at the trends and be a very, very fast follower. Be a faster follower than anybody else. I think is what success is, instead of putting out a 20 or 30-year plan and trying to guess what it's going to be like. Because if you look back in history, nobody's been good at that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. As you look at how the Army and all of our armed forces have served in this war, what's your biggest takeaway on if we're hunting the good stuff, what's the most positive kind of things that you've seen as a result of this experience?
Yeah, I mean, what the war did, it truly empowered leaders. And I remember when I came back to be the ISAF sergeant major, and I'm walking around, walking patrols with different units, and I was amazed how good they were. And because quite frankly, I had some experience in 101st, but that was prior to the war. But I was amazed how good they were. They were basically, Ranger Battalion 6 months behind. I mean, that was it.
Yeah.
One of it was, but I chalk it up to a couple things. I mean, one, it was we were at war, and that's what people did. They concentrated their time on getting ready for combat, and that's where they spent their time, and that's where the resources went, and people were absolutely empowered to do that. And that's what I saw. And so the non-commissioned officer corps, by that time, in the Army, it had gotten evolutionary better because they were empowered, they were better trained. The focus of the military changed from recruiting people just to get out, to recruiting people that you're here for a purpose to fight a war, which is you want to take care of people. At the end of the day, that you got to do is prepare them for war. So it brought in a different class, it brought in people with different focuses. But the officer corps is what really, really was a revolutionary change, because the officer corps is famous for being a zero defect organization, and it was during the 70s, 80s, 90s for the most part in most organizations. But what the war is allowed these officers, to do what they're tasked to do. And even in the Ranger Regiment, the biggest revolutionary change is the quality of the officer corps that I see nowadays. The same thing with the rest of the Army. It's the quality of the officer corps, which, and that's how it's supposed to work together. Is officers have responsibilities, non-commissioned officers have responsibilities. There's tremendous overlap. But, if you're trying, just like in business, if you're doing somebody else's job, you're not doing your job. And, if you're down there, if you're the lieutenant training privates, then who's worrying about collective tasks? If you're the company commander down there training squads, who's worried about the collective tasks and how we're going to get better at the big picture? Yeah. It's the exact same thing in business when, everybody wants to do the next lower levels job maybe you are doing their job better than them. In most cases, you're not, but you're not doing your job. And you have to look at things as organizational leadership, not individual leadership.
You told me one time also, when you counseled E7 Sergeant First Class and above, you often would ask them, are you more like your last job or your next job? And because the platoon sergeant who's complaining about something, in a year or two is going to be a first sergeant putting the same instructions out. But talk about that look of, are you really thinking your level, doing what you should be doing, like you just said, but also thinking about, let me understand why the person above me has given this to me and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, a couple things. I read somewhere, someone said, you're always smarter than your boss. And I think most people believe that. But I think that's okay as long as you realize that you think that you're smarter than your boss, because then obviously the lesson we all learned is, you move up to that next level and you're going to fix all these things, and you go, I guess there's a reason. I guess there's a reason my old boss didn't fix this. This isn't easy as I thought, because there's other factors in there that you just don't consider.
Yeah.
And and subconsciously, something that I was fortunate enough, I think, to learn, but subconsciously, what we don't realize is, you don't learn your job until about 6 months after you're done doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you look, so you never learn your job until you leave it. And so subconsciously you want to take that skill set. Now you finally figured it out, and you're going to tell people. You're really telling people not how you did it. You're telling people how you wished you had done it.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a difference, because you can tell people this is how I wished I had done it. But there's also some reasons you didn't do it. But now that you're a little bit more removed, you sort of forget all those little factors that you didn't take into consideration before. So, your job is, and again, as you move up, is when you're a first line supervisor, whether it's in a military or a civilian organization, I mean, you're responsible for individuals. And then when you move up to the next level, most people still want to spend a lot of time in individuals. And of course you do, because everything's a people business, but you influence the organization through subordinate organizations. You don't influence the organization through individuals. Mm-hmm. And that's a different mindset on how you allocate resources and how you allocate your time. And, I think that's what a lot of people forget is, it's not about, you're not developing your subordinate leaders. You're developing the subordinate organizations. And how do you do that? How do you empower them to do that? And that's a different mindset than working with individuals. And, and as you move up, your percentage of where you spend your time has got to change. I mean, when you're a first level supervisor, 90% of your time is down and 10% is up and out. And you move to the next level and it's probably 70% down and 30% up and out. And then you reach the next level, and really, in most organizations, you reach about that fourth level, and about now, 60 or 70% of your time is really up and out, because that's what you need to empower your organizations to be successful. That's where you've got to spend your time. Give them the guidance and resources they need, but spend your time making sure they have the assets they need. I mean, that's leaders at those higher levels. I mean, that's what you've got to concentrate on, is figuring out what resources your subordinate organizations, and I'm sorry, the subordinate organization is sometimes a bad word in a civilian world. I don't want no one take it bad, but those lower organizations, figure out how to, what resources they need and work on getting them those resources. That's how you make them successful. That's how you make yourself successful. I mean, we all know, and you and I, and we all know, I mean, it's not our personal skills and skill sets that made us successful. It was the people that work for us that, being a leader is earning your subordinates' respects every single day and working hard at that. And then they'll make you successful, which is the ultimate goal, is to make the organization successful.
Exactly right. Yeah. They carried us on their shoulders to success so many times.
Yeah.
Let's if you don't mind, let's transition a little bit. Tell us about the Three Ranger Foundation and the things that you're kind of involved in now.
Yeah, Three Rangers Foundation is piggybacking off of a program called Phalanx that the Ranger Regiment started, which is a professional development concept program to look at long term. How do you take care of Rangers, and how do you keep them in the fight for longer? And that's physically and mentally, professional development, their career, and educationally. And the Ranger for Life organization was started a couple RCO and RSMs ago, but really the big driver that really kicked it into action was Sergeant Major Mike Albaugh, who's at South Africa now. But the concept was, if I learned a long time ago. I remember First Sergeant Stan Fox. I had a guy that wanted to go off. I think he wanted to go off to one of the special mission units, and he wanted to go to Dahlonega to train for 6 months. And I was a little upset about that. And he said, look at it this way. He goes, if you really want to take care of people, sometimes that means helping them lead, because if you really want to take care of people, you take care of them and you help them reach their goals, no matter what it is. Mm-hmm. In the long run, that's going to be good for the organization, because everybody sees that you let, one of your best team leaders, Sergeant Smith, we'll call him, go off to Dahlonega for 6 months to train to go to this unit. And he's successful and he goes away. He goes, who's going to replace Sergeant Smith? And I go, well, Specialist Jones. He goes, you think Jones would be as good as Smith in 6 months? I said, sure. So light bulbs start coming on. Yeah. And he goes, let me tell you something else. He goes, everybody's looking at that. And they're saying, is this about taking care of people, which comes out of our mouth? Or, are we going to show them by action that we really care? And they look at that, and you have some other guys, maybe they're thinking about going off to that unit. And they say, well, look what they did for Smith. They helped him. He left. This is a pretty good organization. Maybe I'll stick around because, maybe they do really care about me. And that's the concept of Ranger for Life program is helping. It starts when they go through the selection assessment process at RASP. And, it helps prepare them that everybody transitions out of the military. And that's something the military has a hard time getting over, but they do. So if you give them the tools and you give them the assets to be prepared to transition at any time, you're probably going to keep them longer because now they're not worried about, do I have to get out and get my education? Do I have to get out and take my, because my body's breaking down? Do I have to get out because I just can't take it mentally anymore? What about my benefits? Will they be there? What about my education? Will I be too old? Will somebody hire me? If you can give them all them tools so they don't have to worry about those factors, the big five of transition. Of course, it's a regiment, so we got to have the big five. Right. If you can give them the tools to take care of, financially and education and benefits and a mentor network and mental and spiritual and physical fitness. If you give them those tools, now it's pretty simple. What's best for me and what's best for my family. And I don't have to worry about all this other stuff so they can make true good decisions. And I think you'll be able to keep people in that. I mean, the big part that Three Rangers Foundation supports with that, along with Gallant Few, Carl Monger and Tony Main, is, we try to grab guys about 18 months out from transition, whether that's retirement or within ETS. It doesn't mean they're going to get out, but that's when you start, really, really talking to them. And we try to figure out what their goals are. And we try to link them up with mentors who have already, former Ranger mentors who have already walked that path. A lot of the guys won't get out because they'll talk to these mentors and, sometimes the grass isn't always greener out there. Maybe this isn't the right time to transition because most people will say, man, I wish I would have stayed in a little bit longer. I don't know if they mean that or not, but we get them linked up with some folks, maybe where they want to live or folks, in the industry that they're already, that they're interested in, and, they'll sort of become a mentor to them, expand their network so they can see, help make a decision when is the right time to get out. And when they do get out, to find, fulfilling work. I think once you transition out, if you can find fulfilling work that you don't mind going to work, you like the people that you're working with, you've got that security, all the other issues that might come with transition, they don't go away, but they're a heck of a lot easier to handle if you don't have to worry about, if you don't mind going to work and you got the security of that paycheck. So that's what we try to do more than anything else is find guys fulfilling work and careers that interest them and get them in organizations that have the same kind of people. You'll never have that same kind of culture that you had in the Ranger Battalion or in the military, for that matter, in just about any organization. But there's organizations that are close enough, and that's what we try to do is steer them to those kind of organizations. And it's a large mentor network out there. We've got about 500 former Rangers out there that are willing to reach out to these guys and talk to them, help them through the transition process. And everybody had it rough. Some people had a little bit rougher than others, and it's like 10% of the people that transition out, ever stay in their first job or their first industry. And that's because you're looking for what you had in the military and you can't find it. So we're trying to close that gap, try to get left of boom, as they say, to say, no, this, here's the real deal in this industry. You want to go become this. You got to go to college and you got to get a degree in this. You got to study these subjects, and not what somebody else told you how to do, because you want to get out and be an FBI agent. Okay, here's the path you really got to take. and you're talking to an FBI agent that talked that, and he'll get you in contact with somebody else in the agency to make sure that you're properly prepared to do that. And if they know that's always out there, again, most people are having fun, but they're worried about taking care of their family. So if they realize, wow, that network's always there and it's always going to be there. So, maybe I'll stick around, or maybe it is time for me to get out because of your what's best for your family, you and your family.
We currently have an exhibit that's called Depicting the Invisible, and it's the invisible wounds of PTSD. It's a stunning exhibit by a woman named Susan J. Barron. And so a lot of our programming revolves around connecting veterans with others. And these great organizations like Gallant Few and Three Rangers and many others, the Veteran Golfers Association, Down the Stretch Ranch in Spokane, Washington, for equine, Links to Freedom, just so many.
I found, Ranger buddies, once you get out, are much more important than the Ranger buddies that you had in. And you don't realize that until you get out. And that's another big, powerful thing about this network is, now you've got, 20 or 30, new Ranger buddies who are going to connect you with other folks. And that seems to be the most powerful element of being surrounded by people that understand you, what you've been through.
Yeah.
What you've been talking about.
Yeah. So everyone out there, this is Command Sgt. Major Mike Hall, 32 years of dedicated service, most of it in Army Special Operations, all of it at the pointy end of the spear. Phenomenal leader, humble leader, great dad, great husband, great friend to everyone. And go to Three Rangers Foundation and help them out. One of the things we like to do, Sergeant Major, is, we're .org and don't get federal funds. And we want everyone to be a member and pay money, help us out. But I want them all to help Three Rangers today and that's this place the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's our business. I guess call it business model. We're sort of fortunate, of course. Every organization needs money to help people, but I mean, our organization it really goes back to the Sergeant Brooks story I told you. It's a bunch of Rangers that are saying, "I'm going to give you my time, to help you do whatever you need to do." So, the funds are obviously important, especially with our Gold Star program. A lot of things we want to do with Ranger Gold Star families. That obviously takes resources. But it's an organization of people helping people that give nothing more than their time, and in many cases, very, very successful people. That the number of general officers and nominative sergeant majors that are part of it is pretty incredible. These are very, very busy people, but when a Ranger says, "Hey, I'm interested in doing this," and that that very important person has the experience, and they're gonna stop what they're doing and they're gonna help that guy out. I mean, that's the culture of that's the culture that we all learned back there. So yeah, we're fortunate.
Time flies when you're being inspired. I'm gonna just close by, you've used the words, trust and respect, innovate, evolve, create, empower, and influence. Those are some pretty good verbs as you go through this, and no surprise that you use them so comfortably, because that's who you are. So I'll give you a second for any closing comments and final remarks, and certainly want to thank you. But go ahead, Sergeant Major, to the audience out there. Anything you want to say?
I just want to say, everybody has their own opinion of what vets are and what vets can bring, but the veterans made this country what it is, starting from 1776, and nothing has really changed, no matter what you read, no matter what movies come out. And, many people serve. I mean, you don't have to have been a military veteran, to make an impact on other people's lives, but that's what life is about making life better for somebody else. So, find something that benefits somebody else, and that's where you can look back and sleep good at night. That you help somebody, make their life better, whatever that is. And veterans are very good at that. And if you give them the opportunity, what they're also good at is they're going to make your organization better, because they always have. I mean, back to 1776, they've always built this country because of the principles and fundamentals that they learned in the military about there's something bigger than yourself. And, that's one of the things that makes America great. So thanks for your time. It's always good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Margie and the whole family, the whole clan.
You got that right. Well, I'm going to turn over everybody. I'm going to turn back over to Colonel Retired Bill Butler, our Chief of Staff. And if he looks like he's in uniform, it's because he is, because we, in fact, are on a movie set and helping Denzel Washington and Ranger Jones and others tell the story of First Sergeant Charles King, and a movie that you will see soon called A Journal for Jordan. So here's Bill Butler. Thanks, Sergeant Major.
All right. Thank you, sir. Sergeant Major, always a pleasure. Thank you for your time and participating with us today. Great words of wisdom from you, as always. I would just like to echo the boss's remarks. There's a lot of great 501c3s out there. And if you find these programs helpful, or you find, supporting and mentoring your fellow service members transitioning helpful, then consider donating your time or money to help them support veterans. So the Three Rangers Foundation, the Gallant Few, those organizations. Just a couple of brief announcements for the museum. On April 8th through the 10th, we've got the artist Mary White. She'll be in the museum. Her exhibit, We the People, Portraits of Veterans in America, is in its final week. And she's going to conduct a couple of sketch classes and some watercolor classes as well. So if you're interested in any of those workshops, check our website out for additional information on how you can join those. And then on April 23rd, we're going to have a great discussion about Operation Eagle Claw. So for those of you who don't know or don't remember what it is, that was a Iranian hostage rescue attempt in 1980. So joining us will be 3 men who were on the ground in Iran when that fateful mission and accident took place. So join us for that. That's going to be a great program. And then over Memorial Day weekend, we've got about, 2 weeks packed into about 7 days. So if you're interested in anything over Memorial Day weekend, we've got the Wall That Heals, a Vietnam Wall replica coming. We've got a Gold Star Family Candlelight Vigil. We're going to do a groundbreaking ceremony for Gold Star Family Memorial. We've got a reunion of D-Day veterans who all jumped into Normandy with the 101st. And then we've got a motorcycle ride from the A.D. Farrow Harley-Davidson dealership up in Delaware County down to the museum and back. And then we've got a great Memorial Day ceremony. And then we're partnering with the Memorial Tournament, one of the Columbus, Ohio's big tournaments with Jack Nicklaus, for a couple of events throughout that week. So we've got a lot of activities, and whatever interests you, whether it's golf or motorcycles or just being a part of something bigger than oneself, come check us out. So that's it for us. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Be safe. Enjoy this beautiful weather. And we'll close our final video. Thanks, Sergeant Major.
Wars aren't fought by countries. They're fought by people. Now, hear their stories in their own words. Honor their service in your own way. At the only museum in America that gives a voice to all our veterans. The National Veterans Memorial and Museum. It's more than a museum. It's the new home of the brave.